Woman mourns her burned sanctuary, then discovers a hidden koala clinging to life. The sun dipped below the towering redwoods, casting long shadows across the rambling old farmhouse. Eleanor, her silver hair catching the last rays of light, stood on the porch, a contented sigh escaping her lips. The air was alive with the sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the hooting of an owl, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a symphony she never tired of, a reminder of the peace and beauty that surrounded her. Eleanor's haven, nestled deep in the woods of Northern California, was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, not for her, though she certainly found solace within its walls, but for the creatures who sought refuge there. Over the years, Eleanor had taken in a menagerie of animals, each with its own story of hardship or abandonment. There was Jasper, the one-eyed raccoon who had lost his family to a hunter's trap; Beatrice, the timid deer with a limp from a car accident; and a flock of rescued chickens, each with their own distinct personality. Eleanor, a woman who had known her share of loneliness, found companionship in these creatures. Her husband, Thomas, had passed away a decade ago, leaving a void in her life that no human could fill. But the animals, with their unconditional love and simple needs, had filled her days with purpose and her heart with joy. This evening, as the sky deepened into a canvas of stars, Eleanor went about her nightly routine. She filled water bowls, scattered feed for the chickens, and checked on the injured squirrel she was nursing back to health in a makeshift cage on the porch. Each animal received a gentle pat, a kind word, a moment of her undivided attention. As she moved through the barn, a soft meow caught her ear. "There you are, Clementine," she whispered, spotting the sleek black cat curled up in a nest of hay. Clementine, a recent addition to the sanctuary, had been found abandoned by the roadside, thin and terrified. Now, she purred contentedly as Eleanor stroked her fur, her emerald eyes glowing in the dim light. Eleanor's love for animals had always been a part of her, a deep-rooted empathy that extended to all living creatures. As a child, she had rescued stray dogs, nursed injured birds back to health, and even befriended the grumpy old tomcat that lived in the alley behind her house. Her parents, though not as enthusiastic about her furry and feathered friends, had indulged her passion, recognizing the kindness and compassion that drove it. But it was Thomas who had truly understood her connection to animals. He had built the enclosures for her rescued rabbits, helped her mend broken wings, and shared her joy in every new arrival at their sanctuary. "You have a gift, Eleanor," he had often said, "a way of understanding these creatures that most folks don't." Now, as she looked out at the peaceful scene before her, the animals settling down for the night, Eleanor felt a pang of longing for Thomas. She missed his gentle presence, his quiet strength, his unwavering support. But she knew he would be proud of the haven they had created together, a place where animals could find safety, healing, and love. With a final glance at the sleeping creatures, Eleanor turned towards the house, a sense of calm settling over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new rescues, new stories to be written in the lives of her animal companions. But for now, all was well in her little corner of the world, a sanctuary bathed in moonlight and filled with the gentle rhythm of life. The tranquility of the sanctuary was shattered in the dead of night. Eleanor awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. Acrid smoke stung her nostrils, and an eerie orange glow flickered through her bedroom window. She scrambled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Rushing to the window, she gasped in horror. The forest, her beloved forest, was ablaze. Flames licked at the towering redwoods, their fiery tongues reaching towards the star-studded sky. The air crackled with an infernal energy, and the roar of the fire was a terrifying symphony of destruction. Eleanor's mind raced. Her animals, her precious animals, were in danger. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she threw on her clothes and raced out the door. The smoke was thick and choking, making it difficult to breathe. She coughed, her eyes stinging, but she pressed on, her fear for the animals overriding her own discomfort. The barn, where most of the animals were housed, was already engulfed in flames. Eleanor cried out in despair, her voice barely audible above the roar of the fire. She could hear the terrified cries of the animals trapped inside, their desperate pleas tearing at her heart. "I won't let you down," she choked out, her voice hoarse with smoke and fear. She grabbed a bucket of water from the well, but it was a futile gesture, a drop in the ocean against the raging inferno. The heat was intense, driving her back. She could feel the flames licking at her skin, the smoke searing her lungs. Desperate, she ran towards the house, hoping to at least save Clementine and the injured squirrel. She burst through the door, coughing and gasping for air. Clementine darted out, her fur singed, her eyes wide with terror. Eleanor scooped up the squirrel's cage and stumbled back out into the chaos. The fire was spreading rapidly, fueled by the dry underbrush and the strong winds. Eleanor knew she had to get herself and the surviving animals to safety. She led Clementine towards the old dirt road, the cat clinging to her shoulder, her claws digging into her flesh. The drive was a nightmare. The road was shrouded in smoke, making it almost impossible to see. Burning embers rained down on the truck, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning wood and the terrifying sounds of the approaching firestorm. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She thought of her animals, those she had managed to save and those she had left behind. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the soot and ash that covered her skin. She thought of Thomas, his calm presence, his reassuring smile. "You're strong, Eleanor," he had always told her. "You can get through anything." She clung to his words now, a lifeline in the midst of the chaos. After what seemed like an eternity, she reached the main road. The fire was still raging behind her, but she was heading towards safety, towards the town of Willow Creek, where she hoped to find shelter for herself and her surviving animals. As she drove, she looked back at the inferno, her heart aching for the creatures she had left behind. The sanctuary, her haven, was gone, consumed by the flames. But Eleanor was determined to rebuild, to create a new sanctuary, a place of healing and hope for those who had survived the firestorm. The evacuation center in Willow Creek was a scene of chaos and despair. Families huddled together, their faces etched with worry, their voices hushed with fear. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the sound of weeping. Eleanor sat on a cot in the corner, Clementine curled up in her lap, her own grief a heavy weight in her chest. She had lost everything. Her home, her sanctuary, her animals all gone, consumed by the relentless flames. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the images of the burning barn, the terrified cries of the animals trapped inside. But the memories were vivid, the pain too raw. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and despair. Eleanor helped where she could, comforting those who had also lost their homes, sharing her meager supplies, offering a shoulder to cry on. But her own grief was overwhelming, a constant ache in her heart. When the evacuation order was finally lifted, Eleanor returned to her property with a heavy heart. The landscape was unrecognizable, a desolate wasteland of charred trees and ash-covered ground. The farmhouse was a smoldering ruin, the barn reduced to a pile of rubble. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the silence was deafening. Eleanor wandered through the debris, her footsteps crunching on the brittle remains of her once vibrant sanctuary. She searched for any sign of life, any glimmer of hope, but all she found was devastation. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. As she stumbled through the charred remains of the orchard, a faint sound caught her ear. A soft whimper, barely audible above the wind whistling through the skeletal branches. She stopped, her heart pounding, her senses alert. The sound came again, a little louder this time. Eleanor followed the sound, her feet sinking into the soft ash. She pushed aside a fallen branch and gasped. There, huddled beneath a tangle of charred bushes, was a koala. Its fur was singed, its eyes closed, its breathing shallow. It was barely alive. Eleanor knelt beside the creature, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. She gently lifted the koala, its small body light in her arms. It was badly burned, its skin raw and blistered, but it was alive. She carried the koala back to her truck, her mind racing. She had no idea how it had survived the fire or where it had come from. Koalas weren't native to California. Perhaps it had escaped from a zoo or a private collection. But those were questions for another time. Right now, this creature needed her help. She drove back to Willow Creek, her newfound purpose giving her a renewed sense of urgency. She found a veterinarian who was willing to treat the koala, despite the overwhelming number of animals injured in the fire. The vet cleaned the koala's wounds, administered pain medication, and gave Eleanor instructions on how to care for it. Eleanor set up a makeshift enclosure in her temporary accommodation, a small room in a motel on the outskirts of town. She named the koala Ash, a reminder of the devastation from which it had been rescued. She spent every waking moment tending to Ash, feeding him eucalyptus leaves, cleaning his wounds, and talking to him in soothing tones. Ash was weak and in pain, but he clung to life with a tenacity that inspired Eleanor. She saw in him a reflection of her own resilience, her own determination to survive the tragedy. As she cared for Ash, she felt a glimmer of hope rekindling within her, a sense of purpose returning to her life. The sanctuary was gone, but the spirit of compassion that had fueled it lived on. And in Ash, Eleanor found a new reason to keep going, a new symbol of hope amidst the ashes. The motel room, though cramped and unfamiliar, became a sanctuary of healing. Eleanor dedicated herself to Ash's recovery, her days revolving around his needs. She sought out fresh eucalyptus leaves, driving miles to find nurseries that stocked them. She carefully cleaned and bandaged his burns, her touch gentle and reassuring. She spoke to him softly, sharing stories of her life, her lost home, her hopes for the future. Ash, in turn, seemed to respond to her care. He would nuzzle his head against her hand, his soft fur a comfort against her skin. He would eat the leaves she offered, his slow, deliberate movements a sign of returning strength. And as the days turned into weeks, his eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to regain their sparkle. Eleanor's bond with Ash deepened with each passing day. She found solace in his presence, a sense of peace that transcended the grief and loss she had endured. He was a reminder of the resilience of life, the ability to find hope even in the darkest of times. The veterinarian was amazed by Ash's progress. "He's a fighter," he said, "and he's lucky to have you." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. She knew that Ash's recovery was as much a testament to her own determination as it was to his will to live. As Ash regained his strength, Eleanor began to think about the future. She couldn't stay in the motel room forever. She needed to find a new home, a new sanctuary, not just for Ash, but for herself as well. She started searching for properties, her criteria simple: a place with enough land for Ash to roam, with plenty of trees for him to climb, and with a sense of peace and tranquility that would nurture both their souls. One day, while browsing online listings, she stumbled upon a picture that took her breath away. It was a small cottage nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and lush meadows. A stream meandered through the property, and a grove of eucalyptus trees stood tall against the backdrop of the distant mountains. It was perfect. Eleanor called the real estate agent immediately and arranged a viewing. As she drove up the winding driveway, her heart filled with anticipation. The cottage was even more charming in person, with its weathered wood siding, its cozy porch, and its garden overflowing with wildflowers. But it was the land that truly captivated her. It was a haven for wildlife, with deer grazing in the meadows, birds singing in the trees, and a sense of serenity that enveloped her like a warm embrace. She knew instantly that this was where she belonged, where she and Ash could start anew. She made an offer on the property that day, and within a few weeks they were moving in. The cottage needed some work, but Eleanor didn't mind. She enjoyed the physical labor, the sense of accomplishment that came with each repair, each improvement, and Ash seemed to thrive in his new surroundings. He spent his days exploring the meadows, climbing the eucalyptus trees, and basking in the sun. Eleanor built a spacious enclosure for Ash, complete with climbing structures, a cozy den, and a pool for him to cool off in. She planted more eucalyptus trees, ensuring he would have a plentiful supply of his favorite food. And she spent hours simply watching him, marveling at his grace, his resilience, his gentle spirit. Life at the cottage was a far cry from the bustling sanctuary she had lost. It was quieter, simpler, more intimate, but it was also filled with a profound sense of peace and connection. Eleanor and Ash had found their haven, a place where they could heal, grow, and rediscover the joy of life together. News of Eleanor and Ash spread through the small community like wildfire. The story of the woman who had rescued a koala from the flames captured the hearts of the locals. People stopped by the cottage with gifts, fresh eucalyptus branches, toys for Ash, homemade pies for Eleanor. They offered their help, their support, their admiration. Eleanor, initially hesitant to accept the attention, was touched by the outpouring of kindness. She had always been a private person, content with her own company and that of her animals. But the fire had changed things. It had opened her heart, made her realize the importance of connection, of community. One day, a reporter from the local newspaper arrived at the cottage. He had heard about Eleanor and Ash and wanted to share their story with the world. Eleanor, after some initial reluctance, agreed to an interview. She spoke about the fire, the loss of her sanctuary, her bond with Ash. She spoke with passion and conviction, her words resonating with the reporter. The article, when it was published, was a sensation. People from all over the country were captivated by the story of the woman who had risked her life to save a koala. Donations poured in, along with letters of support, offers of help, and even requests for visits. Eleanor was overwhelmed by the response. She had never sought fame or recognition, but she realized that the attention could be used for good. She decided to use the donations to rebuild her sanctuary, to create a haven for even more animals in need. With the help of volunteers, she began clearing the land around the cottage. They built new enclosures, planted trees, and created a safe and welcoming environment for animals of all kinds. Soon, the cottage was once more a sanctuary, a refuge for creatures great and small. Word of Eleanor's sanctuary reached the ears of wildlife experts and conservationists. They were impressed by her dedication, her knowledge, and her compassion. They offered their expertise, their resources, and their support. Eleanor's sanctuary became a model for animal care, a place where animals were not just housed, but nurtured, rehabilitated, and, whenever possible, released back into the wild. She worked tirelessly, her days filled with the challenges and rewards of caring for her animal family. Ash remained her constant companion, a symbol of hope and resilience. He had fully recovered from his injuries and was thriving in his new home. He was a favorite among the visitors, his gentle nature and playful antics bringing joy to all who met him. Eleanor's life had taken an unexpected turn. She had lost her home, her sanctuary, her animals. But she had found something even more precious, a connection to her community, a renewed sense of purpose, and a bond with a creature that had touched her heart in ways she could never have imagined. The fire had brought destruction, but it had also brought new beginnings, new opportunities, and a new chapter in the story of Eleanor and her sanctuary. Life at the sanctuary was a whirlwind of activity. Eleanor, with her newfound team of volunteers, worked tirelessly to care for the growing number of animals. There were rescued birds with broken wings, abandoned kittens with runny noses, a grumpy old badger with a taste for peanut butter, and a mischievous family of raccoons who seemed to delight in causing chaos wherever they went. Eleanor embraced the challenges, her days filled with a mixture of joy, frustration, and endless tasks. She medicated injured owls, bottle-fed orphan squirrels, and built elaborate climbing structures for the ever-growing population of rescued possums. She negotiated with grumpy veterinarians, haggled with feed suppliers, and navigated the labyrinthine world of wildlife regulations. But with the growth of the sanctuary came new problems. The influx of animals strained the limited resources. The small cottage, once a cozy haven, was now overflowing with cages, medical supplies, and bags of animal feed. The volunteers, though enthusiastic, were often inexperienced, and Eleanor found herself constantly training, supervising, and troubleshooting. Finances were a constant worry. The donations, though generous, were barely enough to cover the costs of food, medicine, and enclosure maintenance. Eleanor dipped into her own savings, but she knew that wasn't a sustainable solution. She needed to find a way to make the sanctuary self-sufficient. One evening, as she sat on the porch, exhausted but content, an idea began to take shape. She would open the sanctuary to the public, not as a zoo, but as a place where people could learn about animals, connect with nature, and support the sanctuary's mission. She envisioned guided tours, educational workshops, and even overnight stays for those who wanted a more immersive experience. She imagined children's faces lighting up as they met Ash, the koala, or helped feed the rescued birds. She saw families picnicking under the trees, surrounded by the sounds of happy animals and the peace of the natural world. The next day, she shared her vision with the volunteers. They were enthusiastic, their eyes sparkling with excitement. They brainstormed ideas, planned activities, and volunteered their skills to help make Eleanor's dream a reality. Within a few weeks, the sanctuary was ready for its grand opening. Eleanor, with a mixture of nerves and excitement, welcomed the first visitors. She led them through the enclosures, introducing them to the animals, sharing their stories, and explaining the importance of conservation. The response was overwhelming. People were captivated by the animals, inspired by Eleanor's dedication, and eager to support the sanctuary. The tours were booked solid, the workshops were overflowing, and the donations box was filled to the brim. Eleanor's sanctuary had become more than just a refuge for animals. It had become a beacon of hope, a place where people could reconnect with nature, rediscover their compassion, and find inspiration in the resilience of the animal world. And Eleanor, once a solitary woman living in the shadow of grief, had become a leader, a teacher, and a champion for the creatures she loved. The success of the sanctuary brought with it a new set of challenges. The increased activity attracted the attention of not only animal lovers and supporters, but also those who saw the sanctuary as an opportunity for their own gain. One day, a sleek black car pulled up the driveway, its tires crunching on the gravel. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, his smile as polished as his shoes. He introduced himself as Mr. Caldwell, a representative of a development company. He had a proposition for Eleanor. Mr. Caldwell spoke of progress, of the need for modernization, of the economic benefits that a new resort complex could bring to the area. He painted a picture of luxury hotels, sprawling golf courses, and exclusive spas, all nestled amidst the natural beauty of the valley. Eleanor listened politely, her heart sinking with each word. She knew what lay beneath the polished veneer of Mr. Caldwell's proposal. He wanted her land, her sanctuary, her haven for the animals. She politely declined his offer, explaining the importance of the sanctuary, its mission, its role in the community. But Mr. Caldwell was persistent. He spoke of generous compensation, of the opportunity to relocate the sanctuary to a larger, more modern facility. He dangled promises of financial security, of a legacy that would last for generations. Eleanor remained firm. This wasn't about money or legacy. It was about protecting the animals, preserving their home, honoring the trust they had placed in her. Mr. Caldwell left, his smile fading, a hint of steel in his eyes. Eleanor knew this was just the beginning. Mr. Caldwell was not a man to be easily deterred. He would be back with new offers, new tactics, new threats. She needed to prepare for a fight to protect her sanctuary, her animals, her way of life. She called a meeting with the volunteers, sharing her concerns, her fears, her determination. The volunteers rallied around her, their support unwavering. They were a diverse group: teachers, retirees, students, artists, but they shared a common passion for the sanctuary and its mission. They formed a plan, a strategy to counter Mr. Caldwell's advances. They contacted environmental groups, animal rights organizations, and local media. They organized petitions, wrote letters to the editor, and spoke at town hall meetings. They turned the sanctuary into a symbol of resistance, a rallying point for those who believed in the power of community and the importance of protecting the natural world. Eleanor, once a quiet woman content with her solitary life, found herself thrust into the spotlight. She gave interviews, spoke at rallies, and debated with developers and politicians. She discovered a strength she never knew she possessed, a voice that resonated with passion and conviction. The fight was long and arduous, filled with setbacks and disappointments. Mr. Caldwell used his wealth and influence to try to sway public opinion, to pressure local officials, to undermine the sanctuary's reputation. But Eleanor and her supporters refused to give up. They fought for every inch of land, every tree, every animal. And as the battle raged, Eleanor realized that she was not just fighting for the sanctuary. She was fighting for something much larger. She was fighting for the right of animals to exist, for the preservation of wild spaces, for the future of the planet. And in that fight, she found a strength and a purpose that transcended her own fears and doubts. The conflict with Mr. Caldwell and his development company escalated, casting a long shadow over the sanctuary. The once peaceful valley became a battleground, with protests, legal battles, and media scrutiny. Eleanor, despite her initial apprehension, found herself at the forefront of the fight, her quiet determination transforming into a fierce advocacy for the animals and their home. Mr. Caldwell, accustomed to getting his way, underestimated the resolve of Eleanor and her supporters. He tried to discredit her, portraying her as an eccentric old woman clinging to a sentimental attachment to a piece of land that could be put to better use. He painted a picture of a stagnant community, resistant to progress, blind to the economic benefits his development would bring. But the community rallied around Eleanor and the sanctuary. They saw through Mr. Caldwell's slick promises, recognizing the threat his development posed to the delicate ecosystem of the valley, the wildlife that called it home, and the sanctuary that had become a symbol of their collective compassion. The volunteers worked tirelessly, organizing fundraising events, educational campaigns, and peaceful protests. They garnered support from environmental groups, animal welfare organizations, and even local businesses who recognized the value of the sanctuary to the community. Eleanor, meanwhile, continued to care for the animals, her daily routine a source of solace amidst the turmoil. She found strength in their resilience, their unwavering trust, their simple joy in the midst of adversity. Ash, in particular, seemed to sense her anxieties, often staying close by her side, his gentle presence a calming influence. One evening, as Eleanor sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, a group of volunteers gathered around her. They brought news of Mr. Caldwell's latest tactic, a smear campaign aimed at discrediting the sanctuary, alleging neglect and mismanagement. Eleanor felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had poured her heart and soul into the sanctuary, sacrificing her time, her energy, her savings. To have her dedication questioned, her integrity attacked, was a blow that struck deep. But the volunteers, sensing her distress, quickly rallied around her. They shared stories of the animals she had saved, the lives she had touched, the community she had built. They reminded her of the good she had done, the difference she had made. Their words rekindled her spirit, their support fueling her resolve. She would not let Mr. Caldwell's tactics deter her. She would fight for the sanctuary, for the animals, for the truth. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She would not let fear or doubt cloud her vision. She would face the challenges head-on, her voice strong, her heart filled with the unwavering conviction that she was doing the right thing. The battle for the sanctuary was far from over, but Eleanor knew she was not alone. She had the animals, the volunteers, the community, and the unwavering belief that, in the end, compassion and truth would prevail. The storm clouds were gathering, But Eleanor was ready to weather the storm, her spirit as resilient as the creatures she protected. The fight for the sanctuary reached a fever pitch. Mr. Caldwell, frustrated by his inability to sway public opinion or pressure local officials, resorted to more aggressive tactics. He filed lawsuits, claiming the sanctuary was violating zoning regulations and environmental codes. He hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Eleanor and the volunteers, hoping to find something, anything, to discredit them. The stress took its toll on Eleanor. Sleepless nights were etched on her face, and worry gnawed at her. Yet she refused to back down. With each passing day, her resolve grew stronger, fueled by the unwavering support of the community and the unwavering trust of the animals in her care. The legal battles dragged on, draining the sanctuary's meager resources. Eleanor and her team spent countless hours consulting with lawyers, gathering evidence, and preparing for court appearances. The media frenzy surrounding the case intensified, with reporters camped outside the sanctuary gates, eager for any new development. One day, a particularly scathing article appeared in the local newspaper, accusing Eleanor of financial mismanagement and animal neglect. The article, based on fabricated evidence and anonymous sources, painted a damning picture of the sanctuary, casting doubt on Eleanor's motives and competence. The article shook Eleanor to her core. She felt betrayed, vulnerable, and exposed. The sanctuary, her life's work, was being tarnished, its reputation dragged through the mud. She feared the worst, the loss of public support, the withdrawal of donations, the closure of the sanctuary. But then, something remarkable happened. The community rose up in her defense. Letters of support flooded the newspaper, denouncing the article as a malicious attack. Local businesses rallied around the sanctuary, organizing fundraising events and public demonstrations of support. Volunteers doubled down on their efforts, spreading the word about the sanctuary's good work and countering the negative publicity with personal testimonials and heartfelt stories. Eleanor, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, realized she was not alone in this fight. The community had embraced the sanctuary as their own, recognizing its value, its importance, its embodiment of their shared values. The court case, meanwhile, took an unexpected turn. A whistleblower from within Mr. Caldwell's company came forward, revealing evidence of fraudulent activities and unethical practices. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, turning the tide of public opinion firmly in favor of the sanctuary. Mr. Caldwell, his reputation in tatters, his development plans crumbling, was forced to withdraw his lawsuits and abandon his pursuit of the sanctuary land. He retreated in disgrace, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and shattered dreams. The victory was hard-won, but it was a victory nonetheless. Eleanor and her supporters had faced down a powerful adversary, defending their sanctuary, their community, and their belief in a world where compassion and respect for nature prevailed. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stronger, more resilient sanctuary, a testament to the power of collective action and the unwavering spirit of those who dared to stand up for what they believed in. The dust settled, the legal battles faded into memory, and a sense of peace returned to the valley. The sanctuary, scarred but not broken, emerged from the conflict stronger than ever. The outpouring of support during the fight with Mr. Caldwell had not only solidified the community's bond with the sanctuary but also brought in much-needed resources and awareness. Eleanor, though weary from the fight, felt a renewed sense of purpose. The victory had reaffirmed her belief in the power of compassion and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. She channeled her energy into expanding the sanctuary's programs, creating new educational initiatives, and strengthening its ties with the community. The sanctuary blossomed. New enclosures were built, providing spacious and stimulating environments for the animals. A dedicated rehabilitation center was established, equipped to handle a wider range of injuries and illnesses. And a visitor center was constructed, offering interactive exhibits, educational displays, and a cozy cafe where guests could relax and connect with nature. The sanctuary became a hub of activity, a place where people of all ages could learn about animals, participate in conservation efforts, and experience the healing power of nature. School groups visited for guided tours, families spent weekends volunteering, and researchers conducted studies on animal behavior and rehabilitation techniques. Ash, the koala who had become a symbol of the sanctuary's resilience, continued to thrive. He was a beloved ambassador for his species, captivating visitors with his gentle demeanor and playful antics. He even became a bit of a local celebrity, his image appearing on sanctuary brochures, local news articles, and even a regional tourism campaign. Eleanor, watching the sanctuary flourish, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had created a haven for animals, a place where they could heal, grow, and live out their days in peace and dignity. She had also fostered a community, bringing people together in a shared purpose, reminding them of their connection to the natural world and their responsibility to protect it. One sunny afternoon, Eleanor sat on the porch of her cottage, a cup of tea in her hand, watching a group of children laughing and playing in the meadow. Ash, perched on a nearby eucalyptus branch, lazily munched on leaves, his eyes half closed in contentment. A wave of gratitude washed over Eleanor. She thought of Thomas, her late husband, who had shared her dream of creating a sanctuary. She thought of the volunteers, whose dedication and passion had made the sanctuary a reality. She thought of the animals, each with their own story of resilience and survival. And she thought of the fire, the devastating event that had brought so much pain and loss, but had also paved the way for this new beginning, this vibrant community, this sanctuary of second chances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, Eleanor smiled, her heart filled with peace, her spirit soaring with the knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had created something truly special, something that would endure long after she was gone.